Okay, the next problem we're going to look at is the problem 911, where we're going to draw a full section through this kind of cylinder. It's kind of a plate or pulley with this keyway, and it has some different ribs that connect from one to another. I mean, when we look at this object, the first thing that might be really important to do is just to look at what's metal, what's material, and what's not. So we know these areas with the drilled holes are going all the way through because of our hidden lines over here. So we're going to make sure we know that these are holes. You'll notice a common pattern where at least I'm trying to key up or know where there's going to be material in the drawing and where there's not. The next area that we know is cut through or is empty are these areas in between these fins. And the reason we know that is because there's these little ribs here, and these little ribs represent these kind of spokes in the wheel. So this area is actually no material. Right, this area actually has no material. And this area here has no material. So now we start to get a sense of what is solid, right? What is solid here and what is void. The next thing we want to do is draw a full section. And we need to know our cutting plane line, right? That's the first rule. We've got to come up with our bold cutting plane line. So to cut through this object and to tell the proper story, what we're going to do is we're going to just cut straight across this area here, because that's going to tell us about this drilled hole, right, that we have in every condition. It's also going to tell us about this rib or this cut through, right, because there's a little cut through here. But remember, one thing we'll do is whenever you have a thin spoke or a thin rib or web, right, and that's, for instance, anything that's not solid all the way through the object, we're not going to show that cut through. So our cutting plane line is going to go straight through, and we're going to look in that direction. So I'm going to draw my cutting plane line. And I'm going to say I'm looking that way. Now remember, if I'm looking that way, that means all this material back here goes away, right? It's almost like you pretty much are imagining this thing erased all the way through. Right? Nothing left. So then what we'll do, now that we're looking at this object and we're only cutting through that portion, we're going to use our side view, and we're going to duplicate our side view down here on the section view, and then cut out and bold the important parts. So I'm going to create some projection lines. And so I'm doing these little areas where we have the hole cut through, we have this edge, we've got our back edge over here, right? We have our edges of the little smaller holes, but notice, here's the key, there's no small hole over here, so we're not going to show this guy over here. This one's not even going to show up. So we'll keep projecting lines, but when we come back later, we'll make sure not to illustrate the edges of the object. Don't forget, if we're going to show the thickness of this wheel, right, we're basically taking and we're drawing down from here. And I'm carrying that all the way through, right? And one additional thing we'll show all these edges. We'll bring down the center line. Here. Okay, so we've got all these lines that we brought down, but then we're going to pick out which ones count. And we'll first start by drawing a ground plane, right? We need something to base our view or our section from, which will be that area there. The next thing we'll do is we'll look at, on our section view, and we'll translate our side view, right? We'll take and we'll get the heights from the side view. And all I'm doing is kind of following that same boundary. Transferring my points over. All these points are following are these areas here, right? And I'll come back and further define, just creating outlines. Okay, so we've got this kind of basic outline of the object, and now we need to fill in all that stuff that we're cutting through. Okay, so we're going to start drawing those cut lines. Well, the first thing we're cutting through is this metal right here, and that metal is 100% thick, right? So basically this entire portion right here is going to be hatched and cut through. And the reason that is because we're cutting through all this area right there. The next area we're cutting through, we're not cutting through any of this right here. So all this information that comes from these ribs is going to show up, right? It kind of follows that look there. That's just going to be a plain line. There's no cut there, it's just a regular line. You'll even see the back of the object, right, like that, which when we're looking there, it's the back of this rib here. And then we're going to be starting cutting through the center object here, right, the center raised ring. That's going to look like this, because we're just cutting through right there. We've got to show the back of the drilled hole here, and there's even one additional area that you could project, this keyway, right? This keyway comes down and it shows up back here. Every one of those little lines shows up, and we could draw that back there as such. The next area we're cutting through is the other raised portion, and it looks exactly the same. Hatched through, complete. We'll show the back of the pulley, right, this back edge, just like we did over here. It's fairly symmetrical, except there's no rib over here, right? There's this little rib, this little spoke over here, that shows up like that. Over here there's no spoke. And the next area we cut through now is different than this side. This side has a little material right there. It goes empty because there's a hole there, and then the other side has the exact same material. And of course we'll hatch that. And then if you have the room, you would come in and then you would show the center lines for this drilled hole to really make the drawing pop out. And there's your full section view, right? Notice it's asymmetrical because we cut a section that doesn't cut through everything the same.